Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following story is part of the Mayhem Cerebrum project. Link to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request. Quite obviously, by this point I'm sure you can tell where this story is going, but I hope that you will join me for the ride. As always, when it comes to card-related stories, thank you, Dragon, for helping me piece together what exactly this game is going to look like. And yeah, I think it came together pretty well. So let's do it. Here we are. I'm equally excited for the story that this builds to. So without further ado, here is A Cautionary Tale of Devils and Moonlight, Part 2. There was something Holiday didn't understand about this whole situation. As Bake shuffled the cards, he looked so driven, almost angry. He had never met this man before in his life, so what could he have possibly done to bring this out of him? As was customary in blackjack, Holiday threw down his bet before the hand was dealt, a crisp $5 bill. Not a small bet. He wanted to show that he was a high roller. After he was done shuffling, Bake glanced down at Holiday's bet, grinned, and placed a 10 on the table. "You must be a man of means, sir," Holiday whistled. This told him one of two things. Either Bake was rich enough that the value of dollars was entirely distorted, or he was very foolhardy. But he just shrugged in response. "Money doesn't mean a lot to me," was all he said, which didn't tell Holiday anything. Clearly he handled cards a great deal because Bake shuffled and dealt them very cleanly. However, his gambling etiquette left much to be desired. Firstly, he dealt to himself first, laying down a card labeled the Sun and one called the Tower. Each featured a visual depiction of its namesake, and a number on the top in Roman numerals. Secondly, he didn't alternate dealing the cards. This would make it a lot easier for him, or Holiday, to cheat. He was confident that he could call Bake out on anything he'd try, but was he trying to get him to take the bait? Or was he just really stupid? That would remain to be seen. It took Holiday a second to recall which numeral was which, but it appeared as though they were 19 and 16 respectively. Bake's opening hand was worth 35. Of course, you couldn't apply basic blackjack strategy when the numbers were so fucked up, but at the very least, there wasn't a single card that could bust him at the moment. Holiday's cards were the 7 of Swords and the Page of Wands, which was a face card, so worth 10. 17. Still a long way to go before the dreaded 69, and less than Bake's to boot, so he had a little wiggle room. He decided to test the waters. Bake was playing it cool, but he seemed to be a rather emotionally driven individual, so Holiday chuckled. Quietly, under his breath. "And what's so funny?" Bake asked immediately. So he could be pushed easily. "Nothing at all," Holiday replied. "Just feeling like the good lady luck is on my side today, that's all." "Well, if you're feeling so lucky, why don't you go first?" Bake sneered. Smiling affably, Holiday continued to play it cool. If he was always smiling, nobody could tell what he was really thinking. "Suits me just fine," he said. "Hit me." Bake drew another card off the top of the deck and placed it next to Holiday's. The Emperor, worth 4. Of course, Holiday hit again, the Knight of Cups, and again, the Wheel of Fortune, 10. Now he was at 41. Not there yet, but getting close. Next was the King of Swords, 51. Now there were several cards that could put him over, but this was far too low. He'd have to take a chance. "Hit me." He tapped the table, and the next card out was the 7 of Wands, 58. He could take a chance and keep going. If he was honest, he probably should have, but something was pulling at his gut. Something told him to stop. This would, of course, force Bake to aim higher or bust. It would be a chance. "I'll hold." Holiday nodded, trying to look confident. But Bake scoffed. "Is that it?" he asked, leaning forward over the table. "I can do better than that. Check this shit out." He drew a card and was immediately presented with the Hermit, increasing his score by 9. The Page of Swords right after that was worth another 10, bringing him to 54. Next was the 4 of Cups. He was now tied with Holiday, so he had to draw again. Holiday wanted to try to get under his skin early. He could do anything worth 11 or under and win, but there was always a chance one of those rare, high-value cards could show up. Unfortunately, Holiday didn't get a chance to try anything because Bakke drew almost immediately, and then froze as he glanced down at the card in his hand for a moment. He set it down on the table, sighing. It was the Hanged Man, worth 12. He'd busted by 1 point. Holiday laughed, scooping up the pod while Bakke scowled. "There's something about that card," he muttered to himself. "I don't like it. Mayhaps it's wanting you to give up now before you end up like him." Holiday smirked. Usually he wouldn't lay it on quite so thick, but he had to compete with the man's sense of drama somehow. "You know, you're really fucking confident for someone who just got his ass publicly called out." "It's called a poker face. Doesn't seem like you've heard of one." Bakke drained his glass of whiskey and slammed it on the table. "Start dealing so that I can wipe it off your goddamn face." Of course, after seeing Bakke stumble so hard, Holiday had a lot of confidence in his odds. This immediately proved to be premature. Seemed Bakke had gotten a read on him, and his game tightened up immensely. In the next few rounds, Holiday snuck in a win or two, but Bakke had started to even out the odds a bit. Gradually, Holiday felt himself itching to do something that would switch the odds back in his favor. A little insurance, at least. But Bakke knew his game and was watching him like a hawk. Except that Holiday realized quickly what Bakke's one fatal flaw was. The man drank like a racehorse. A few rounds later, he was already finished with his second glass. So when he bugged the bespectacled bartender to simply bring the bottle over, Holiday suddenly glanced at the top card of the deck. All he could see was the number 14 at the top. The cards were longer than they should be, but he still managed to shoot it up his sleeve at just the right moment. The number was a bit large, but occasionally he was finding that large numbers came in handy, and at the very least, it gave him options. Holiday was still up, so he decided to take a chance, to get serious. So he reached into his suit jacket pocket, it was a tasteful brown velvet, and placed a $20 bill on the table. "Now we're talking," Bakke chuckled, taking another swig from the bottle of the cheapest whiskey available. It was a marvel that he wasn't even slurring his words yet, although it was clearly affecting him somehow as he matched Holiday's bet without blinking. It was Holiday's turn to deal. He didn't dare try anything, as Bakke was watching intently again. He dealt him the 10 and the King of Wands for a starting hand of 20. Holiday got the star and the 3 of Swords, also 20. Huh, what a fucking coincidence. Bakke blinked at the cards, as if trying to gauge something from them, and while he did so, Holiday placed another card in front of him. "I'd appreciate it if you'd not fall into a drunken stupor until after our game is finished," he sneered. "Ah, who cares?" Bakke glanced down at the card Holiday just dealt him. The Magician. "I can beat your ass in my sleep." The cards came out, and Bakke kept tapping. Finally, Holiday placed the Death card in front of him, bringing his total to 65. Holiday fully expected him to take the chance, as he had a habit of forcing his luck, but Bakke instead waved his hand. "That'll do. Gotta keep you on your toes a little." "Well, I'll be," Holiday chuckled, "and here I thought you couldn't count properly. Even a dumbass like me is gonna be able to count your net worth by the time I'm done with you." Yet as childish as his taunts were, Bakke had put Holiday in a pickle. He had to get within 3 points of 69 now. A very thin margin. He had a little help if he needed it, but he wasn't even sure that would work out. First up was the 7 of Pentacles, then the Queen of Swords. The 9 of Pentacles brought him to 46. That card up his sleeve was worth 14, and that would only bring him to 60. So fine, he drew again. But perhaps the Blessed Lady had fled from his grasp. Number 18, the Moon, stared up at him. His total was now 64. Not enough to beat Bakke. Too high to play his cheat, and most certainly almost too much to be able to cinch it. "Aw, man, that must suck for you," Bakke laughed. There was still a chance. Holiday held his breath as he flipped the last card over. The King of Cups. A bust. That hurt. $20 was a lot of money. But he would make it back. As long as he kept a cool head, he wouldn't lose. "You know, there's something my pappy down in Georgia always used to say to me," he mused as Bakke scooped up his winnings. "What's that?" "When the going gets tough, always double down." "Words you live by?" "Well, he gambled away the entire family fortune, so not particularly. But in this case, I think I can see what he meant by that." "Your pappy sounds like my kind of guy." I certainly hope so. Bake looked up from his cash, a little confused. Like I said, he always lost. Sometimes Holiday almost thought himself a prophet, because, just like that, his luck turned again. Maybe he'd had, finally, a bit too much to drink, or maybe it was just the sheer chance of the draw. Bake started losing. Holiday was usually a somewhat conservative player. It helped mask the cheating, or when he couldn't, minimize losses. Today, he decided to take that advice. To go big. To double down. This son of a gun had besmirched his, if unwarranted, honor, and Holiday was going to make him wish he hadn't. And so Bake's betting pool got smaller and smaller, while Holiday's grew. True to his word, it didn't seem like the money mattered all that much to him. He still doled it out with reckless abandon. It was the principle of the thing. Holiday could tell he was a man who was not used to being bested. His mood grew more and more foul as the game continued, and much of the crowd had started to move away in response. "You know what? Fuck it," he slurred in his odd manner of speech. "You've been doing really well for yourself over there, but don't you want to go out in style?" "I'd rather go out with money." No, listen." He banged on the table, probably a little harder than he intended. "Hear me out. We both go all in. One final round, winner takes all." Holiday laughed out loud. He couldn't help himself. It was a desperate ploy to give himself one final chance. This was a man who truly loved his gambling. Holiday couldn't relate, but he loved suckers who did. "Allow me to make you a counter-offer." "A counter-offer?" Bake blinked incredulously. "What the fuck is this, a goddamn boardroom?" "Now hear me out." Holiday smiled affably. "Why on earth would I give up my superb advantage?" "Because it would be cool." "But I'll take your bet, on one condition." Bake waited. "If I win, you'll take back what you said." "I say a lot of things, buddy. You'll have to be a little more specific." "I am not a cheater. You'll announce it to the whole lounge." Holiday expected him to take a second to think about it. He didn't know why he had any expectations to begin with, really. Leaning back so far in his chair that it almost tipped over, Bake nodded. "Yeah, all right. I'll just win." Bake flipped his few remaining dollars in the center. Holiday rustled through his rather large stack before placing the whole thing down. He didn't necessarily like how precarious his profit was, but Bake was well into his cups, and Holiday still had a bit of insurance. "Then let's play." It was Holiday's turn to deal, and so he gave the deck a quick shuffle. He was feeling a lot better in his hands now, and placed them down. For himself, the 5 of Cups and the Knight of Wands, for a total of 15. For Bake, the 4 of Swords and the Hierophant, for a grand total of 9. Bake grinned. He definitely had an advantage here. He didn't even wait for courtesy. He tapped the table and said, "Hit me." Holiday wanted to push the issue, but he instead laid down another card in front of him. Almost painfully slow, the cards came out. King of Pentacles, Knight of Wands, 10 of Cups, 8 of Cups, 4 of Pentacles, 7 of Cups. He was 12 away now, hitting the danger zone. But of course, with an ominous thump, Bake's finger hit the table again, and Holiday drew a final card. The Knight of Cups. Bake's hand totaled up to 67. For the first time in the game, Holiday's chest properly tightened. His heart picked up its pace. 67? How in the hell was he ever supposed to beat that? The odds were minuscule, next to impossible. Across the table, Bake leaned back and smiled like the devil. For a brief second, Holiday wondered if that was exactly what he was. "It's your turn," he said. Breath a little quicker than it should have been, Holiday placed a now sweaty hand on the deck. This was exactly why he didn't like to leave things up to chance. They always seemed to go wrong at just the worst possible time. But now it was all in the hands of the Blessed Lady. Holiday almost found himself praying. Almost. He pulled the first card and flipped it. The 8 of Swords. Then the next, the Chariot, for 7. It felt like everything was moving far too quickly. The 6 of Swords was next, then the Queen of Pentacles and the 9 of Swords. His total was 55, starting to get close now. Wait. One moment. Hadn't he been waiting for a 55? Of course. The card up his sleeve had been worth 14. This was his chance. His one and only chance. And it had to be clean. Perfect. Bake could not know. Carefully, oh so carefully, Holiday placed his hand on the deck and slid the card out of his sleeve directly into his palm. Then he made a motion as if he really was drawing a card and flipped it. He hadn't been able to see it before, but the card was titled, ironically enough, Temperance, and was of course adorned with the number 14. The two of them stared down at the row of cards, Bake genuinely calculating, and Holiday pretending as if he was. When enough time had passed, he shook his head and laughed. Well, I'll be damned, he said. I do believe that with that 14 there, I have a total of 69, and with the ad hoc rules in this farce of a game, that's blackjack. Holiday had been staring off into the distance, proud of himself for pulling it off, but when he looked back, Bake's expression had changed. His lips were spread, teeth exposed, yet for some reason, it didn't really look like he was smiling. You cheated, he mumbled, still staring down at the cards, and Holiday's heart momentarily rose to his throat. You must have. He suspected, but he didn't have any proof. Then it was time to nail the lid onto this coffin. My good sir, he shook his head, I do believe you are breaking the terms of our agreement. Terms? If he had been paying enough attention, Holiday might have noticed the dangerous intonation that had crept into his voice. We agreed that if I won, which I did, that you would take back those words. And that was when Bake started laughing. Low, at first, but more and more manic until he finally looked up. Holiday's breath caught in his throat. He looked too giddy to be angry, but far too angry to be giddy. And his eyes, even under the brim of his hat, they glowed. They were an extremely unnatural shade of emerald green, and Holiday found himself falling into that terrifying gaze. I don't have to do shit, he said. I know you cheated, even if I don't know how, and while I frequently tolerate cheaters, you're so damn smug about it that I don't think I will this time. Holiday stiffened. Inevitably, Bake was about to pull a gun on him. He'd had to deal with that before, and he started reaching for the inside of his waistcoat. But that wasn't what Bake had in mind at all. He lunged forward, across the table, grabbing onto Holiday's collar. Though they were indoors, a fierce wind swept through the lounge, and Holiday shut his eyes against it. But when he opened them again a second later, Holiday screamed. At least, he would have, if he could. The table was gone, the chairs, too. All the people around them, even the very room itself, had vanished, and instead, Holiday found himself dangling from Bake's grip over a roiling sea of greens and purples. It was a mass of shapes and lights and colors. But that's not where his eyes were stuck to. He was struck with the thought then that his earlier musing had been unfortunately right. Bake's hat had been taken with the breeze, and now Holiday could see what it had been hiding. A pair of pitch-black horns that spiraled around both sides of his head. He was the devil. Who are you? He asked, barely managing to squeak the question out of a constricted windpipe. Bake just laughed, that expression on his face still as unfathomable as the colors around them. Somebody you really shouldn't have fucked with. But I guess it's too late for the warning now, huh? Though he tried to get something else out, anything, Holiday felt as though he had met the fate of those cheaters less fortunate than himself, sunk to the bottom of the Mississippi. You know, Bake said lazily, floating along as if this were nothing to him, I came here because I thought you might be someone I've been looking for. But as it turns out, you're not. You're just some nobody shithead from some boring-ass reality that nobody gives a shit about. And nobodies don't get to fuck with me. You really thought you could play against a god and live to tell the tale? Maybe some, but not fucking me. Now, there was only one hand on his collar. He tried to claw at that remaining appendage to do something, but Bake simply let go. Nice try, dickweed. You're gonna float there in the nothing and think about what you've done. Well, for the minute and a half that you exist before the might of causality just kinda crushes you to death. Or whatever the hell it does, I don't really care. I'm not even gonna remember you like a week from now. Nobody will. Arrivederci, ass munch. And with that last word ringing in his skull, Bake was gone. That, however, was the least of Holiday's concerns. Pain shot through him as he felt himself crushed inward and pulled apart simultaneously. His bones crunched and popped. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Something was threatening to tear open his skull and flip his brain inside out. Oblivion bit at him, raked its claws along his back, beckoned him into its frozen embrace. But he wouldn't go. He refused. That man, that thing, that devil, whatever it was that had done this to him, had broken their deal. Holiday didn't care what he had to do, what he had to endure. He was going to track that son of a bitch down and hold him to his goddamn word. Whatever it took.